what is happening with this TSL presentation, the new paradigm of attraction. And it's basically using social dynamics to express ourselves and be better with women. One of the things that we're all so good at TSL is basically learning to be a better man through seduction. And what happens is when you get really good at that, your whole life changes. This was actually like a huge thing that we were talking about with the 21 convention. And something unique even about my role with T21C, because of the dating coaches, there's not a lot of people who've changed like in all the ways that the 21 convention promotes. Like I've worked out with most of the fitness guys. I've done a lot of the stuff philosophically, like I'm there with it all and dating and yada, yada, yada. You guys get it. This well-roundedness and being the ideal man is a huge part of me. But let me tell you, that all starts through seduction. Now, perhaps if you have a different teacher, like if you have Mark Otobre as a teacher, that's going to start through fitness. But hands down, if guys stay with TSL, the sexual life, they become better human beings. That is undeniable. So what we're actually sharing here is this new paradigm of attraction, which really isn't new. It's old. It's actually older than me and older than any of my theories, but I've been teaching it for a long time. Okay, and it basically states that you can be yourself, and if you are yourself, you can connect better and be more fulfilled with what's typically taught as attraction. In fact, like it's more based off of you because attraction is natural. So let's stop thinking of attraction as this controlled, manufactured, man-made thing that's dependent on us getting away from nature. What pickup and social dynamics generally teaches, like if we're going to be attractive, we have to have something outside of ourselves. And let's start looking at it as something that more of what we're born to be. The philosophy of TSL, and this is very like key, because I was talking with Mark Sisson, who wrote he's a big paleo guy. He's kind of the original, well, one of them, the paleo guys, but very popular. He's the owner of Mark's Daily Apple, which is a very popular health blog. And we were talking about what it meant to be born to be. And even has a book on like the primal connection. So how you can connect better and how you were born to be. And man, it's crazy. This is where like TSL really shines because we take this philosophy and put true functionality in it. It's not just about gardening and going out and making friends with people face to face. We're really like, this is how you do it. Like if you can't socialize, if you're socially dysfunctional, if you're bad with women, if you're good with women, if you have sexual dysfunction, if you have whatever problems, wherever you come from, if we can get you to be simply social in front of somebody, you can really shine, okay? So basically, bottom line is because we have this born to be philosophy, check this out. It's really simple. It's already in us. It's already in us. Everything that you need to be more social and sexual, already in you. You're good to go. We just need to find it. We need to get it into action. Okay, so pick up in social dynamics, social value, all this sort of like, tips and tricks. Those are all great and they can work, but if you stay with them, the only result will be actually like you stepping away from yourself. Okay, so the key thing about this philosophy is just to amplify who you are. Now let's like define attraction a little bit. This is very important because TSL, we really talk about sexual attraction, like what it really means, and pickup attraction is kind of like this thing that we build back and forth and, it builds this, I don't know, whatever, pumps this buying temperature and state and all that sort of stuff. The interesting thing is what attraction really is two things coming together. What sexual attraction is it's two things coming together with the sexual feeling in mind. And when we look at the marketing or the labeling of attraction and pickup, it's implied that it's sexual attraction. But how it's taught is actually not like this woman sexually wants me. It's like this woman is buying into my plot and my game and thinking I'm more valuable, and that's going to trigger her sexuality. It's total bullshit. It's not even how sex works. Sexual attraction is natural. It's actually independent of all this shit. Okay, so at TSL, we basically want to move two people together, right, in a sexual way. In fact, create a situation of sex. Let men be men and women be women. If you're heterosexual. If you're homosexual, a little bit different, but hey, it's all good. All sex is good. All sex is some sort of expression and communication of self, and it needs to be that way. So some principles to keep in mind when we're working this sort of sexual attraction, expression. We're going to talk about that. Like, how can you express yourself? How can you get closer physically, mentally, emotionally, situationally, all these different things? How can you feel more? Because rapport is dependent upon feeling. Sex is dependent upon intent and exchange of intent. So how can you do that more? And then, of course, intent and isolation. These are all things that are going to be phenomenons in your situations and talking to people. And so really think about this. If we can strip away like all the rules about how socializing is supposed to be, just for now, and think, how can we express? How can we get closer? How can we feel more? How can we exchange intent? How can we isolate? If we can actually get into what that means and see that as the real baseline, and then put in, just kind of like insert in, how to socialize, how to apply social dynamics, how to apply yourself in the right situations, and make that secondary, we're much better. So a lot of times we make primary the rules and social situations, and then the idea of pickup and social value. We're actually going to put that off as second. And the main things we're going to look at are these principles. Okay, so how pickup explains attraction is totally fucked up and retarded and can be disproven every which way to Sunday. All right, so the first one is attraction switches. So leader of men, pre-selected by women, protector of loved ones, willingness to emote, sense of humor, a successful risk taker, willingness to walk away, all these things. If we were going to do them, we presented social value. And no doubt that could present social value by society standards, but not by nature standards. So these standards here that you're seeing are what? Like as old as society is, as old as this society is, as old as superficial societies are. These were much different maybe 200 years ago. They were much, much different 1,000 years ago. They're much different in different cultures. These would actually be, in Western culture, they'd be, have different levels of it, but they'd basically be completely different from an indigenous culture. They'd be extremely different in pre-agricultural cultures. And we talk about all this, and you might be like, why does this mean anything to me, Steve? What the fuck? But the reason why that's all being brought up, okay, is because our evolution is millions of years old. As Homo sapiens, it's 200,000 to 300,000 years old. It's a long time, right? But our cultural and societal, evolution is very short. We're talking 10,000 years, more like 3,000 years with the different population densities. Because 10,000 years ago there was agriculture, but only in one area. Anyway, I digress. Whatever. We can talk about it later. In other words, these attraction switches are kind of new ideas. And they're not like these evolutionary hacks and all this sort of shit. They're cultural hacks. And they can work. But they're also dependent upon you being something other than yourself. Meaning that in how this was taught, and actually how it's implied in the underlying philosophy, is that you are not good enough and these things are better. And let's explain this more. So how this is taught, if we want results, if we want to fuck more chicks or have more sex or be a happy sexual man even, we need to be this and not us. Well, the thing is that because that's in the underlying philosophy, then it's always something outside of us that's better, okay? So it's basically saying the result is the main thing. Even if we naturally had these qualities of leader of men and pre-selected, we were just born with it. But we thought there was a better way. We'd look to maximize these rather than maximize what's within us. And actually what's interesting is these things are all unnatural qualities for us in lower population density societies and all sort of stuff. Okay, so they don't exist. So value. So basically that was all to demonstrate higher value. But what the pickup community turned to be a little bit later, as years progressed on, because to be honest, all these could be, like I know plenty of guys that are good with women. In fact, the guys that I know that are best with women usually don't have a lot of these qualities, nor do they talk about them. And that is hands down the truth. I mean, you compare a guy like Jason Savage to a guy like who's really into this stuff, like Mihao. Jesus Christ, give me a break. Like Mihao has perfected the image of this and the personification of this, and Jason Savage had none of it. And I would actually say Jason Savage would probably lay more chicks in a week than Mihao would in a year. That is not an exaggeration. It's just how it is. Sorry, guys, to burst your bubble. Value was the next distillation of all this sort of stuff. So it was like, all right, we don't need to get so particular with the, attraction switches, and let's not get so compartmentalized. Let's chill from mystery and all that sort of stuff. And then it became like, look, if you could up your social value, if you could up your persona, if you could up your people's perception of you and look more valuable still towards society. So it's really kind of the same thing. It's just more generalized. Then you're going to have more people attracted to you. Okay, so again, it's the answer outside of yourself, but this is really, really a big thing. We still have plenty of people teaching to this day what this is and people living by it. And it's really sad. Like if you say this at TSL, like, oh, but how do I gain more social value, or I'm losing value, or I'm like, people are looking at me bad. It doesn't matter. Like at TSL, for guys who are experienced, they'll say, okay, well, you can still connect. The next is natural. We're going to thank RSD for this one, but being natural is great. What a great term. It's kind of like authenticity and integrity, and they've just been ruined and smeared by marketing. It's like these great words of description of what we really are, but marketing has totally like bastardized them. So being natural was basically to mimic what guys who are naturally good with women, what they're like. All right, so they're always smiling, they're always having fun, they're in state, they're physically aggressive, they're in a natural state of being, and when you can be in a natural state of being of a guy that's good with women, you're going to get good results of guys that are good with women. Still a few problems here. It's looking for the answer outside of yourself, and it's still focusing too much on the result rather than the expression. Now, it might sound a little bit weird, but look, results are only good if you're doing them, okay? So if I get results of making a lot of money or fucking a bunch of chicks or whatever it is, being like happy and on a beach somewhere and getting a great trip, that result will be the happiness and the fulfillment of that result will be very short-lived unless it's a true expression of myself. Okay, and if expression is what makes us happy, that means I can express and not even get the result I wanted and still be happy. That is actually how humanity works. So I can express that I'm sad. Man, let me tell you some of the most powerful moments of my life. In fact, one of the best and worst moments of my life was one where I found out terrible, terrible news. Terrible news about my family. Terrible news that was breaking things apart and, changing me for life. It was just fucked up. And I sat and all I could do was cry. Like all I could do was just feel. It was fucking a horrible feeling. But at the same time, it was the purest feeling that I had felt in a long time. And that being such a pure feeling, there was reality, there was relief. It allowed it to pass and not turn into a resentment or hate or anything like that. And it also made me realize who I really was. Like I remember that moment to this day, rather than the other times where I might have gotten results of success by putting on a front in order to, maintain, a good face, which sometimes you got to do. But those times that I did that, I don't really look at myself as like real lessons of who Steve Mayeda is. So expression can be a very beautiful thing. Anyway, then there's the non-PUA approach. Now, I'm going to talk about this because it can be very confusing for people. Like at TSL, we are adamant. There's authenticity, there's your expression, and there's you being you, and there's no real middle ground with that. Like you can't fake it. Well, in 2010, you started to see this new breed of coaching, which is very good. Excellent coaches. If you just want to learn to meet and approach women and essentially do what pickup offers to do, like have conversations, talk to people, have sex, but not really discover yourself and not really discover the riches of who you can be while being sexual and authentic expression, these coaches are great, man. I actually reference people to them who need help with approaching. But this is where you learn like the principles of masculinity, the image of masculinity, which attracts women, okay? And if it's essentially that right now what you're doing isn't working because you need to be a hero, you need to be a leader, you need to be a warrior, you need to be a badass, you need to be somebody that can fucking know who you are and yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? What I know from pickup and seduction, and again, like way back in the day, not to bring up Jason Savage, but during 2010, that was like at a very high level sexual activity of myself. I didn't approach a lot. I was actually talking to Canute about like 2012. I don't think I really approached anybody, but I had more sex and better sex than other people. Now, in like 2007, 2008, I had more sexual partners and approached a lot, but sex wasn't very good, and I actually didn't have a lot of sex. So in 2010, actually, I had a lot of sexual partners, and I would talk about this with Savage all the time, is that, man, like, it doesn't matter about being a leader. It doesn't matter about being like this alpha dude or a hero. It doesn't matter about the decisions you make. It matters about what you feel with somebody and the decisions that you personally make with the person in front of them. And that's what causes empathy and the joy and the true expression of who you are. And so when this new kind of like expression of dating coach came around, and a lot of these guys are not like malicious marketers, but it still was about finding something outside of yourself. And this thing that I was coming on to, a lot of things that I would talk to with Jason about, was about how I could, feel and be me and enjoy sex, learn to love again. In fact, I talk about this a lot. I had sex before pickup, but in like 2006, 2007, 2008, I had had a lot of sex, but didn't necessarily enjoy it. And I had it so much that I had forgotten that I had enjoyed it. If you have it repetitiously over and over again and things aren't working, and I'll make another presentation towards this because it's very important and it's very consistent of what happens with people with addiction or misuse of sex or misuse of love. Well, in 2008, I fell in love and I learned to have good sex again. But I also realized I could fall in love. And then I started to fall in love more with more women and have good sex with more women. Well, it didn't necessarily make me happy. It got me a result. Again, chasing a result at the expense of being myself. And so, God, when you put that into the mix, it can totally screw you up. This is a problem that a lot of, actually, these coaches personally that I know run into. In fact, I don't know one that hasn't run into this, of where we get good with women, we get good with what we want, we get good at falling in love, and we get good with all this external validation of what that is, but we're not happy. And what does that say about us? We've talked about this in other webinars. What belief does that build? It means that I've gotten every advantage that I've wanted, and I've failed. There's something fundamentally wrong with me, and that will grow and grow and grow and get deeper with us, and can turn into a lot of self-hate. Anyway, none of these are sustainable. Okay, so ultimately they can work. All of them can work. All of them. Whoops, went the wrong way. All of these can work. Attraction switches can work. Value can work. Being natural can work. The non-PUA dude who's the hero image guy, like that can work. But they will not sustain. So they can work. They're good enough to get a result. They're good enough to sell. They're good enough to get some good reviews. Good enough for all that sort of stuff. But what we want is true fulfillment. And that can only be gotten from looking within. Okay, and actually I was on a conversation or on a podcast with David Tien, and it was amazing because he said, hey, you can't love yourself, or it's all about self-love, and actually I kind of chimed into this. You can't love yourself unless you can accept yourself, but you can't even get there if you don't look within and express that to the outer world. Okay, and so you shape your outer world by what you feel within. And he said, man, one of the greatest pivot points, this is a huge thing he added to the conversation, and it actually really made me think a lot. He's like, but you can't discount the external, because a true man who changes, and if you really get to your true self, exactly what you're saying is right. I would actually, he says, I agree. Start with it within, focus that outward, and have it shape your outward world. But in order to really get to know myself, and he's like, Steve, you probably naturally do this, but a key point that we see in our teachings is when our outward and external results also start to shape our inward results. I thought that was interesting because the two go back and forth. A lot of the times with self-help, pickup, consumption, commercialism, all that sort of stuff, we see the outward world, the pursuit of the outward world to change our inward world. It can do that. Absolutely it can do that, but it won't sustain. The inward world needs to also affect the outward world. Anyway, so on. Basically, look, guys, you got to do the identity workbook. You got to look at yourself. You got to go out there and experience with the world. And hey, do what you can do to get leverage. But here's the deal. It needs to come from within. And you have to respect that, or else it will not work. In fact, very specifically, if you only seek outward results, you will build an ecosystem that can very easily grow, manufacture self-hate where it you didn't have it before, and it will also help you hate other people. which you may not have had before, but it will make that, and it does make that. Pick up a lot of self-help, and this kind of like self-help junkie culture has totally created that shit. So watch out for it. Look, the nature of sex basically is this. People are going to want to have sex. And I always bring this up. People's nature is to socialize with one another and have sex with one another. And actually, our social skills, our evolutionary social skills that we've had for millions of years of some humanoid form, and in a Homo sapien form that we've had for 200 to 300,000 years, I know it's a pretty big gap. It's a 100,000-year gap. But nonetheless, a long time, man, it was all to have sex. So our sexual urge is the most powerful and the constant. So check this out. If you put a bunch of people in one space, like think of your favorite restaurant, right? Or the last kind of public place you were in. If you put a lot of people in there and they didn't know each other and they stayed there, they'd get to know each other, okay? And like I always bring this up, like you put some people on a plane, you get to know them. The longer the plane ride is, like if you're traveling to Europe, this is actually what's really crazy. If you put people on a plane, like let's say from California to Australia, which is like this absurd 20-hour flight, let's say they didn't sell enough tickets and the airline fucked up. This actually happened to me on multiple European flights. I'd go from Houston to France. It'd be totally empty. This was in 2011, man. It was unreal. Anyway, you know, you get to lay out, sprawl out, all that sort of stuff. But what was almost inevitable, and I might be a little bit more of a social guy, is I actually got to know multiple people on that plane. Okay? Because the long duration of time talking with the staff on the plane and then introducing me to other people, like we actually made big connections. Whenever I was on a plane that was densely packed, I only got to know maybe, and sometimes not at all, the person next to me. So you put a bunch of people in one singular space. Let's bring it back to Earth here. I know I was talking about a lot of crazy stuff there, but one singular space, you put 50 men, 50 women in there, they're going to talk. They're going to interact. And ultimately, they're going to start having sex. That is what will happen. That is our nature. You already have that nature in you. Don't think you don't. All right? Now, some more than others. So some people will get to know each other better. There's going to be people that make more friends. There's going to be people that have more sex than one another. And they're going to do different things. Like some of those people are going to be louder. Some are going to be more dominant. Some are going to be more, you know, whatever the fuck it is. The funny thing is the less densely populated, just like that airplane I was talking about, the less densely populated that is, the less this will be prominent. It will be more even. It won't be some more than others then. It will be everybody kind of has fulfillment, okay? Now, the more densely populated that is, the more crowded it is, the more extreme it will have to be for others to, you know, get results and so on. It will be more uneven. Okay, so there will be guys and girls who have a whole lot of sex, and then there will be more guys and girls who have less sex, the more densely populated that gets. There'll be more of an extreme. Okay, and this brings us into scarcity, which we always hear about. So when we don't have enough of something, we fight for it. Okay, and you can see this with food, you can see this with time, money, water, and so on. But look, if we're born to be social and born to be sexual, those are our birthrights. And in fact, if you watch my 2014 21 convention speech, which may or may not be online right now, I go into this in depth. But we fight. We fight for others. We fight within ourselves. We fight. Distress happens, okay? And so things like identity, things like self-worth, these all now have meanings. Things like happiness now become this thing that we work for rather than this thing that we exist having. Things like emotional range, things like sexual fulfillment. It's something that we have to fight and commodify for and work within society rather than just exist in our born-to-be state. So this is like a huge thing. Now what that all tells us, okay, that tells us that if we were born to have sex, if we were born to be social, if we're born to have ambition, if we're born to think, like all the things that we had, that any human being in whatever primitive society that we had 70,000 years ago, it's actually interesting because 70,000 years ago, apparently it's guessed that there were like 1 million human beings on Earth. But this volcano erupted in Indonesia, screwed it all up, and then it went all the way down to 10 to 20,000. Small groups in Africa. Just think if that didn't happen, what our human population would be like. Man, it would have been so crazy and different. But anyway, so that set us way back. But even at that time, 70,000 years ago, 80,000 years ago, whatever you want to say, those things where we didn't have the society, we had some born to be things. We had some urges that were within you, all right? All those things you already have within you. You don't need to work for them. You need to learn to have them. You need to learn to do them, okay? Social dynamics, these theories, these ways of doing things, these tricks, these whatever, the things that I'm actually going to teach you here in a second, these are all accents. They're tools for you, all right? A hammer does not make the house, or it doesn't make the design of the house. It's a tool of the design of the house. And then you got to think, where does that design come from? Well, it comes from expression. It comes from human beings thinking about stuff, all right? These are tools for you. Social dynamics without self, without you, without expression, without the truth and the realities of what you're born to be will fail, okay? And we'll see it over and over again. We'll have sex, but it won't be sex. We'll have girlfriends, but they won't be relationships. We'll talk to women, but they can't be women anymore. They have to be objects, okay? And all those things, can have their place, and societal labels and all that sort of stuff. It happens, but we got to get back to that nature. It's very, very key, all right? Anyway, it gave a whole lot of food to this thing called the PUA industry, or the self-help industry for that matter, whatever. Anyway, attracting women. To attract women, we only need a few things, okay? And let's go back to those principles of attraction. We need to be alone. We need to exchange intent. We need expression. We basically need to be in our natural state, okay? And still, even then, she can decide not to like us, all right? There is so much of a decision in here, but we need to have that situation. And so what really makes this happen, this urge of man and woman wanting to come together for sexual purposes, means men and women just need to be alone. Still, she can deny you, but man, if you can get that, you can make the phenomenon that you already have within you of attraction work. We can understand that. We can get in those situations. We can be ourselves. It's a lot easier when you like yourself, but you can still do it even when you don't like yourself. But if we can get in those situations and be ourselves, then we can add social dynamics. All right? So hopefully you guys were on the same page with this. I know I talk about this stuff a lot and I kind of hammer it in. Believe me, once we get into rapport cycling and structured conversation, we'll start stepping a little bit away of this heavy philosophical stuff. But man, it's really important that you learn this. Just get in the situations, learn to be yourself, learn to get in touch with you, then we apply social dynamics. So here are the tools of attraction. And in the mechanics of attraction, in the TSL workbook, what do we cover? We cover opening, we cover teasing, we cover bait, we cover conversation. With those 4 tools, we can accomplish a lot, okay? And we are going to get a little technical here, and this is actually where I shine and where TSL shines and where the alumni of TSL shine. We can break down social dynamics like crazy. Like, in fact, more than most people, even though they're talking about value and all this other stuff, like we will get fucking nuts with it. Like PUA geeks love it. So let's do that, but even though we're exceptional at it, the main thing is you need to know how to be you and let your natural functions take over. So opening, we have some presentations on this. I don't want to get too into it, but you can reference those. Basically, presentations on how to be yourself and open. Look, and do it in all sorts of different ways. There's situational, there's direct, there's indirect. None of that matters. What matters is that somebody is in front of you, paying attention to you, and you're in an area where you can start to talk to them and like it. Like you're in an area where you can start to express. Now, because human beings want to express, we want to feel something, we want to connect with one another, we want to have empathy and emote, and these things are all very real. It's just stuff is moving so fucking fast. Our population is so dense, we're looking at a lot of superficialities. Okay, so people want to connect. You have to, you need to know this. You need to talk to more people to know this is a reality, because the more you talk to people, the more you're going to hear, man, I hate being fake, or God, like superficial world, yet we live in it. I do it. I know this and I teach this, and I'm superficial a lot of the time and get like really into it. Anyway, but I also have faith that every single human being that I talk to has the capability to have rapport and connection with me, and actually wants that. Maybe not with me, but with somebody. And we're actually in deficit of it. We're in deficit of good sex and good rapport. Know that. Almost every woman you talk to is missing that. Even if she is having sex, it is having like good sex. She's not having all the good sex that her body and her mind and emotions probably desire. All right. So we're kind of skipping over opening there, but definitely revisit the other webinars and you can see all that sort of stuff there. And we'll continuously talk about it. But look, the function of opening is to get somebody to pay attention to you. If you get somebody to pay attention to you for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, you're a good opener. All right? That's really what matters. Now, teasing is another one of these kind of like superficial things that we use in social dynamics. It's as old as pickup. You know, teasing and nagging, technically in pickup there is a difference, but we're going to call them the same thing. It's a push-pull device. What we want to see done here is push and pull back in the right direction. So for instance, if I've done the identity workbook and I know I'm attracted to women who are like petite, if I know I'm attracted to women who are open-minded, if I know, and these could be physical qualities, mental qualities, whatnot, emotional qualities, and I know what's attractive about me is my ambition, I can start teasing and using push-pull to move back and forth in that direction. We're going to workshop a few of those. So an example of this is like if I'm motivated by sex, which is true for me, and I'm somebody who's insecure about being shy, not necessarily true about me, but I am insecure about being shy about certain things about my life, just not everything. And I also live in a one-bedroom apartment, which is not true now, but has been very much true about most of my heaviest lay pickup career. I had that. Definitely wasn't insecure about it. It was awesome. Anyway, so the thing is like if those are the three things that I got from the identity workbook that I want to put out there. What I want to do is put this into a social dynamic. So check this out. All right. If we're teasing somebody, a tease is just a joke. So we're in some social setting, we open, they're paying attention to us for 20 seconds, and we know we need to get to connection, which is what we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks. If we know we need to move to something which has meaning, I need to start laying the groundwork for that to happen. Most nags and teases, they're like, oh my God, I can't talk to you. You're like totally whatever. You know, it's like to cut her down, to build value, to break rapport, all this stupid shit which like works enough for you to have faith in it, but like doesn't actually get you the result of sexual, of social, of really making friends with somebody. And it's pretty stupid. And so I'll even say this, teasing is fucking stupid. It's retarded. But when used in a social dynamic, it has purpose, the way that we're going to use it to swing back into something that we want to talk about. So you could say like, oh man, you're somebody I can't talk to, you're like totally closed-minded. Like, you know what? I bet you're always somebody that like you love to gossip. Like you're one of those people that like will spill the beans, but you spill it about like the racy stuff, like the secret your friend told you about hooking up with that guy. All right, so there's a couple things happening here and I underlined them, but obviously, it's like, oh man, I can't talk to you. That's the neg, right? That's the tease. But you're totally closed-minded. All right, now, ideally, you don't want to put like 4 things in a tease, but if she'd push back to that, it's like, man, I can't talk to you. You're totally closed-minded. She's going to push back and say, what? I'm not. So, okay, well, let's have a talk about how open-minded you are because I really value that. I can start to move into normal threads of conversation. Look, if you are practicing TSL, and you're not doing this, you need to be doing this. Now, there was a guy who was talking about the check-ins and how he had talked to this girl. Look, you already hit rapport with that girl. You don't need to do the teases. It's all good. You don't need to be like, oh man, I can't talk to you. You're not even like into philosophy as I am. Like, you're already in that conversation with her. The more you tease, it doesn't equate the more you'll get there. You need to tease once to get yourself on the road. What gets you there is the connection of empathy and all that other stuff. Anyway, I bet you always gossip. Like women never like to say they gossip. And actually that's a key there because one of the frames for sexual framing, if you're really into that stuff, a very like skilled PUA thing and something that I know a lot about. But if we want to use that in our favor as a social dynamic, as a tool of true expression of ourselves, there's no problem with that. But one of those sexual frame things is like to show that you can keep a secret. So I'm bringing up gossip to kind of like get on that topic. Well, really, are you somebody that can keep a secret? And are you a friend that like spills the beans about basically a bunch of sexual stuff? And so number 1, that's going for the secret thing as well. But number 2, that's moving into like sexual behavior and having judgment over it. And what do you think of it? And who are you as a sexual person? Now, again, I'm kind of like writing it for a template here is a guy who's motivated by sex, and you're kind of shy, and you live in a one-bedroom apartment. Well, we only really went for open-mindedness and sex there, but hey, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And these ones, we hit the other ones. Bam! All right. So you can say, man, I can't believe you said that. I bet you're one of those like classists, like that's all judgmental. Like the first thing you ask somebody is like the American thing of like, oh, so what do you do? What do you do? How big is your apartment? And so on, and all these like superficial things, right? So that's kind of like a push. And this is in a direction that I wouldn't recommend myself, but if a guy was really insecure about living in a one-bedroom apartment, I always say bring it up. But if this were me and I was like, I don't fucking care if I live in a one-bedroom apartment, which, hey, I wanted a better place when I lived there, of course. But I just knew that didn't matter. In fact, I don't want to say I intentionally kept it messy, but I kept it messy because I was lazy, and I was kind of empowered by that because it made me think of Last Tango in Paris and that little loft where Marlon Brando, his place wasn't necessarily messy, but it was barren. It wasn't cool. It was a place where you could have a secret. Jason Savage, the opposite, would say, because I told him, I said, man, yeah, my place is a shithole because fuck. Why else would a woman walk in this room? And he's like, dude, Steve, I have fish tanks and lavender and incense burning and velvet, whatever, all because the same reason as you. Why else would a girl walk in there other than to have sex? But mine's livable. Anyway, the thing is I might say something like, oh man, I can't talk to you. You're probably one of those people that likes to be alone with a man in a romantic area, and you can't just be carnally yourself. Like you'd probably judge like being in a room that was just made for your body or something like that. So I tease in that area and try and move more towards sexuality. And also I drop tonality and get like really into it to start to thread those things. That's something for you guys. If you do want to hit sexuality or any emotion, mimic it yourself with your voice, your facial expressions, your eye contact. You can do those sorts of things. And if a girl responds to them, you're really not tricking anybody. You're like, hey, I'm speaking the language of sex. Are you going to speak it with me? Some girls do, some girls don't. Most girls probably won't, but the ones that do, cut everything else out and speak that. Another angle you could take with this as an example of a tease is you're like totally a girl who's all like judgmental about like shy guys. Like, I'm insecure around you. Like, you know what that means, right? You probably only date assholes. So this one's actually hitting kind of hard with the you only date assholes and the shy guys part to talk about the shy thing. But if I were actually doing it improvisationally on shyness or telling a client who is shy, I'd probably say, oh man, you're probably like judgmental about like dudes who are shy. Like you have this overt personality that always has to be extreme and like stupid shit. You can't be down on the level, man. It's fucked up. You know what that means, right? You hate America and everything else along with it. Or whatever, just to joke and release it. But then I try and move into a conversation about, how she connects and intimacy and some of the highlights of what being shy does. All right, another one is like, man, that's something a person would say that you totally can't trust. Like I bet if I said, watch my phone or something, I need to go to the bathroom, or there was some emergency and I had to freaking like save a baby out of a car that was burning, what would you do with my phone? I bet you would fucking like go through it. First you'd look through all my pictures and like do some backstory stuff, and then you'd send all the people on my phone some like perverted text message. You're totally a girl like that. I cannot talk to you. So again, that's funny and entertaining and all that sort of stuff, but I'm going for one, trust. I can't trust you. And then I'm like kind of like socially joking in an artful way about basically like what I would, I'm going to go save some baby and yada, yada, yada. But then you would send a bunch of like dirty, evil, nasty, like totally perverted. Like I might even get like sex offender status just by sitting next to you. Something like that. If I had said teases along those lines, well, then I could have a conversation about them. All right. So hopefully you're kind of getting what I'm saying. Now, dude, look, these are ones that I wrote. You guys are going to have teases that are your own. If you value how you play Monopoly or computer programming or whatever, stuff you don't think you can talk about, you can. All right. So we'll improv those in just a second. Bait is another form of social dynamics. It's a push-pull device. And I don't want to get too into bait here, but we're just doing one form in this, which is asking and denying. But there's another one that we teach at TSL called being vague. Just asking and denying is very quick and easy to understand. So it's basically asking something and then denying them. So it's like, hey, I have a question for you. No, wait. Actually, I can't ask you this. And then she pushes back. Well, what? Tell me. Like, you could open with this. Hey, I have a question for you, but actually, you know what? I'm sorry. You're. And then she's, what? Tell me. And it's like, okay, well, look, are you somebody who gets along with shy people or extroverts? Now, I used to use this technique all the time when I wanted to jump to sex. So I'd be like, okay, I have a question. Like, I don't know you and I'm just approaching you or whatever, but like, are you married or in a relationship? Or they'd say, I'm single, I'm married, I'm in a relationship. And I'd say, well, I'll ask you anyway. It has to do with like sex and how you're attracted to people, but I don't mean it in a bad way. And then boom, I'd be like in a very good conversational space to talk about sex. Now I'm motivated towards that. If you're motivated towards Star Trek or some shit, you'd be like, all right, I'm going to ask you something and this may date you. So answer honestly. If I ask you who Uncle Jesse is, what TV show do you think about? And, they say whatever. They say, I don't know. And you say, well, look, this was more relevant in the 90s, but some people would say Full House. The cool people would say Dukes of Hazzard. But I don't know. I could transition that to Star Trek on a better day, but I don't know enough about it. But I know there's a Star Trek dude on here. But I could say, but there's another one. Are you a new Star Trek fan or an old Star Trek fan or whatever? Anyway, there's all sorts of different shit that you could do to use bait to work that asking and denying thing to move things in the right direction. So another one, hey, where are you from? And they say wherever. You say, you know what? I'd ask you this, but you're from Austin, and I'll ask you it anyway. Okay, like when you're attracted to a guy, does it have to do with his like shyness or his overtness? Like, what do you like better? Okay, so I can very easily start to move in a direction. Now, if you're already in rapport with somebody, like I was saying, like you don't need to do this stuff when you're in rapport, but you can use baits, dude. You should use it always because it's so consistent to hurdle into a new thing. So you could be like, no, I love philosophy. Or let's say that special somebody listening to this live presentation, let's say you kissed a girl and it just kind of naturally fell into something. You're going on another date and there's like some tension and you don't know. And you're like, look, I like you, but I want to know what you would say if I just said, I liked you and you could be whatever it is, you could take it wherever you'd want to take it. And they react. They like say like, well, I don't know. It just means something cool. You can say, look, I was actually asking you that to see how you reacted and if you went into kind of like a reactive state or you could actually talk to me. And man, I don't know if I could tell you this. Like, fuck. Anyway, forget I brought it up. And they'll say, no, don't tell me. You say, well, it's kind of a big jump, but like the fact that you were in whatever XYZ state, whether they reacted or they were non-reactive, you could say, that was one of the most attractive things, and it actually turned me on in a way that was totally unexpected. The more we get into seduction, you're actually pointing out a unique reaction about them that you say is attractive, and when you state intent towards something unique about a woman, she gets turned on like you. It's actually point 4 and 5 of the 6 points of escalation right there, and it's just a good way to jump over that hurdle, but you use bait to get there, and a little quick framing thing to go in there. Anyway, it's just a very, very cool thing. And again, what's so cool about social dynamics is you're using things to get to your natural expression. Look, you like this girl. You already know she likes you. I mean, shit, she was making out with you or kissing you or whatever the hell it was. But there's resistance. You want to get to a real self. If you talk to somebody's reactions or fears, you're talking to a distortion. You're talking to what they're not born to be. Have the conversation with which is within them. Now, conversation is the next form of what we're talking about in the Mechanics of Attraction workbook. In conversation, basically, we're saying talk about what you want to talk about. Now, conversation at TSL gets fucking crazy, all right? When we get into rapport cycling, this will be nuts. But what you need to learn to do is start having conversations about things that you're interested in. So, for instance, here we're just talking about some questions. So it's like we meet somebody at Whole Foods, they're like, oh, these avocados are different. Why are these avocados 50 cents and these like $10? And like, what the, like, can you answer that? So you go in with some stupid situational thing about that. But she's paying attention to you for 10 seconds. Okay, so your open is actually successful. All right. Now, what we want to do is start to move to like some conversational threads. And you say, you know what? I have a question for you. Do you think like how we live is a reflection of how we think? Or is it more about the situation? I really want to know. And then you could start going into threads about your apartment and different living situations. But you could say like, no, look, it's interesting because people say like how we live has so much to do with us. And how I live is very simple and I think it's very important. But when I talk to people about status or like, oh, I live in Terrytown, and they get all excited, which is a rich part of Austin. And then they find out I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Terrytown. That matters. And the thing is because I value simplicity. Like, let me ask you, do you talk about your values? So you can start to move into areas of your life that you care about and actually value. Anyway, you could also say, as you're looking through avocados, or whatever section you're in, or perhaps you're at a different place other than Whole Foods, and you're hanging out at a cafe, and you're like, hey, are you somebody that thinks more about someone physically or emotionally? Like, how did you pick your last boyfriend? Okay, so you start to get into a discussion about what she likes about somebody, which in this sense, we're trying to go for the shyness, all right? Do you like people that are shy, extroverted, whatever? In reality, just like us, we're like, I want blondes. I like a girl that parties. I like a girl that's at home. I like a girl that cooks for me, and she'll still suck my dick at night, yada, yada, yada. Look, that's rarely what we actually date. And hey, we can be very fortunate about what we date, but believe me, I have an awesome woman. I didn't like pick and manufacture that in my mind. It just sort of happened, and then it worked out to be really good. I've also had a lot of relationships that were good and bad, and hey man, there's just a lot more to it with all that sort of stuff. So when women put out their checklists of what they think is hot, I doubt they get that. And actually, I'd even say with the hotter women, it's like, what do you want? What do you think is attractive? Man, so why don't you get it? Like, do you get it? Yeah, I get it, got it. Okay, so show me, prove it to me. Or if a girl really steps up to me hard, I'll step back to her. All right, another thing that we could say as we're hanging out in the strip club where girls will be like, I get what I want. And I'm like, if you did, you wouldn't be a stripper, but cool. Entertain me with what you're attracted to and how you consistently get it because you're awesome and I should give you $20. But please tell me. I might move to this conversation and say, hey, look, do you think personality types are attractive, or is it more how personality types interact with you? She's like, man, I'm confused. Not just a stripper, but any girl would get confused by that. I'd say, no, look, because this is my personality type. Like, I'm somebody who's really shy and doesn't like to talk to people, and I actually get afraid and insecure about it. But a lot of girls would tell me that's kind of cute, whereas confident guys tend to be really arrogant and egotistical and have like bad relationships with people. Anyway, yeah, what do you think? Like, what is attractive to you about a personality type? Look at that. Anyway, look, check this out. All those social dynamics that you learned have less to do with perfecting these social dynamics. All right, so like teasing and bait and all that sort of stuff, like that's cool if you do it like awesome and like grade A perfect, like you're a stud and like they work or they don't work. Man, that's not the reason why. The reason why they work is because you have allowed attraction to happen. Did you see that? I just got beautiful food from my woman. And she's not even going to say hello. Anyway, it's probably because I was busy doing this. But basically, look, you have allowed the phenomenon of attraction to happen. That's how you've got to realize that. Like, you are allowing it to happen. You haven't made it happen. Okay, so what you need in order to have connection happen, which is really the next phase, like meeting and making that meeting possible to grow, is pretty much what we learned. Okay, so attraction game and pickup, which is like how to get somebody's attention and really not how to produce the phenomenon of attraction, is really like, hey, how can we meet somebody and get somebody to like kind of pay attention to us? That's phase one. Phase two is how do we connect to them? Well, we connect with two things, rapport or seduction. Now, TSL, believe me, if you can get to seduction, do it. Go for it. I'm all for it. I love skipping to it, but it doesn't always happen. You know what happens all the time? Almost that can happen in any situation is rapport. Okay? Now, if the girl gets like horny and wants to bone you and some other crazy shit happened and you did all the right things and the stars aligned and seduction happens, I'd say that's kind of 1 out of 20 times, which is pretty fucking awesome. That's pretty badass. All right? Skip rapport, go to seduction. All right? There's all sorts of different balances and whatnot, but rapport can literally transition into any social whatever. Okay, so if you want to make friends with somebody, you want to build social circles, you want to buy something, you want to sell something, you want to seduce somebody, rapport can pivot from all that. So we say teach rapport first. Okay, so rapport is where both parties care about one another. Okay, so I care about what you think, you care about what I think. Seduction is where both parties exchange intent, sexual intent. I want you, you want me, and that is shown in some way. Whether it's verbally said, which is the rarest, but it's physically done, it's done with our eye contact, facial expressions, but you feel it. And look, you're a human being, you'll feel it, trust me. All right, so this means that the social dynamics around rapport all have to do with caring in what you value, not social value, what you value. So the social dynamics around rapport, it's all gonna be moving towards like what we care and value. So essentially, all this stuff, teasing, should be about what we care and value. Opening should be about what we care and value. Bait, what we care and value. Our conversational threads, what we care and value. And if we can kind of allow attraction to happen, it will happen with the right people. It's not going to happen with everybody. Not everybody's 100%. They might be having a bad day. They just might not like you. You may turn out to not like them. But anyway, look, rapport is going to have to do with what has meaning to us. All our social dynamics are going to have to do with that. Now, seduction, because it has to do with intent, all of our social dynamics would have to do with intent. Like, how are we going to exchange this? How am I going to get closer? How am I going to say I want you? How am I going to say you want me? All that sort of stuff. All right, so our social dynamics are going to be revolving around these concepts. It's actually very simple, right? So it's like, hey, I'm born to be social, I'm born to be sexual. Let's experiment on a passable level with some teasing, with some bait, with some conversational threads, with some opening. And then Steve says, make the topics about shit that I care about, and then I'm going to learn some rapport. Dude, great. Do this. If I hear you guys on calls and you're like, well, I opened this girl and I said this and I took the fucking XYZ, super hyper approach. I'm like, man, what? Like, do what we're learning. You can do that. I don't care if you do the super XYZ hyper approach. That's some badass shit. Look, dude, I teach that shit in the advanced course. You could say, look, I like that super XYZ approach. That's fucking badass. But add what we are doing. Add what we are doing to this. Okay? So add what you're learning with this. You should be functionally learning what we are teaching here. Okay? So that is very, very, very important. If you're not doing that, you don't have any point of reference in TSL. Okay? Very, like it's great. I can give great advice, but you got to take it to the next level. All right. So if rapport is our goal, look, all social dynamics can come from it. You need to talk about what you care about, thus inventory yourself with the identity workbook. You need to explore yourself in the identity workbook, and man, you need to be able to connect with rapport. Like that is, like, get to that ground. I know if you might be an advanced dude, there's actually, on this particular course of TSL, there's this really advanced guy that can get to sex right away. Man, I'll tell you this, anybody who's been at TSL for a long period of time, like some of the mastermind guys that, 2, 3, 5, 8 years into it, actually we're adding up the times of how long you guys have known me. It's over 30 years of experience. It's fucking crazy. Over 30 years of experience, if you added up the 8 guys in the mastermind and how long they've worked with us and known me, it's a lot of experience. It's a lot of women. That's a lot of interactions. But check this out. The thing is that if you are, if you're one of those guys, what you're going to hear consistently is not like, oh man, I have the results that know how to bang and all that stuff, and everybody's in their own life, and some guys might be really promiscuous, and some guys might be like really passive, and some dudes might be celibate, but whatever. There's all sorts of different expressions of lifestyle among those guys. But dude, the crazy thing is they'll all tell you, man, learn some form of empathy, learn some form of connection. That is so important. So rapport, always a good place. Now, check this out. We're actually going to pause here, but let me just take you through improvisationally through some of these things because we only talked about one type of guy. Okay, we talked about one type of guy that is into, what is it? He's shy. He's into being sexually motivated. He lives in a one-bedroom apartment. But let's say you're a dude that just got out of college and you're trying to get your feet wet with a career. Okay, you're like, man, pickup tells me I need to be a rock star. Pickup tells me I need to be this and that. But like, God, to be honest, I'm lost and I don't know what to do. What if you wanted to have a conversation like that? What if you wanted to open people? Well, first off, you don't want to open in the most extreme case. You want to open, again, like if you want to have a life with like a lot of hot women and you don't have a life with a lot of hot women, first off, you don't really know what that is yet. So you're coming from a place of without. All right, so you need some experience. Well, go for the easiest successes possible. That doesn't mean you're going for like sixes. It means you're not going to challenge yourself in nerve-wracking ways to gain a skill set. You're going to learn a skill set so that you could perfect it, perform it in the ways that do cause you natural stress. In fact, like I have this whole thing about pushing your comfort zone. You don't need to do it. If you live ambitiously with life, the right resistances are going to come in front of you. Okay? So basically, the thing is that you could be talking or walking around like anywhere. You go to a coffee shop, the barista's there. It could be a guy, it could be a girl. Like I would actually, if you're going to practice social dynamics, at first practice it with everybody. Don't put yourself under unnecessary stress. You should challenge yourself, but man, don't make it just about hot chicks. You'll work yourself backwards. But you could say like, hey, you work at a coffee shop, and like, how long have you lived in this town in Columbus, Ohio, or wherever you're at? And they say, oh man, I grew up here all my life. And you can say, look, do you think it's weird for somebody to take some time off from school and see where they're at with life? And they say, well, yeah, and they start talking about themselves. And let's say you want to tease. And you say, oh man, see, you're one of those happy people that knows what you want all the time. I can't talk to you because like you don't doubt yourself enough. And like, I'm in this weird point of doubt. They say, no, well, tell me. So you're just using a social dynamic to steer the conversation in that direction. Again, it's not about value. It's about expressing yourself. And so then maybe you want to do some bait and you say like, look, I actually want to ask you something here, but forget it. It's too, you might not understand. And so they say, no, tell me. It's like, well, look, I didn't grow up here, and I grew up actually without a mom. So I just have a different perspective and philosophy on like women, relationships, on ambition, and all that sort of stuff. But let me just ask you a random question that you probably don't know why I'm asking you this, but with what you do and what you want to do, does that reflect like what your parents wanted you to do? Like, I really want to know. So now you're actually getting an expression from them, which is huge for rapport. Again, moving towards value, what they value, what you value in your thoughts, which you haven't really told them yet, but you're moving towards somebody's values. They may answer, they may not be able to answer, they might feel uncomfortable answering, but either way, you're having a discussion now with what they value, all right? And then if you get fancy and we want to start moving more towards seduction and more rapport with that, we could even start stating intent towards like, hey, look, I know you can't tell me it's a deep question, but man, I could tell you're a really honest person, and that is fucking awesome. So now I'm starting to state intent towards something that they value. So I'm starting to move in that direction. Well, let's say you are at a place that's easy to talk to, and you're pumping gas, and there's a hot chick on the other side of the gas pump, and you go like, man, I can't believe gas is so cheap. Like, I'm from Texas, and when I first moved there, it was 99 cents. It's fucking crazy. Like, where are you from here or what? And they say, oh, I don't know, This girl probably gets hit on all the time because she's hot and she's driving a red Mustang or some car that like a hot chick that would just be like, oh my God, I can't believe it, is driving. You're totally nervous. And you just say, look, I actually have a question for you, but you Man, you give me the. I can't believe I just brought that up. It's like so fucking rude, man. Anyway, just what's your names? No, no, tell me. Again, bait. Okay, and you're actually using your nervousness to your advantage, which is good. Believe me, when you can be nervous in front of a girl, like it hits some weird sexual trigger. It's good. It's an awesome thing because it just makes her know she's affecting you, and you're still passively getting along. It's great. It's great when you're escalating, like be nervous. It's all good. And so she's like, tell me. And it's like, well, look, you're attractive. Probably a lot of people talk to you about being attractive and all that sort of stuff. But do you think driving a like really awesome car like that do you get more attention or less? And actually, let me ask you this. If you drive like a so-so car, like do men like notice you or hit or like what happens? And like what kind of men basically notice you? So there I'm using like bait to move to a qualifier. If I wanted to tease her, I'd be like, dude, like I can't talk to a girl in a red car. That's just like it's too much. Blonde girl, gas station, like geez, man. If you're old enough, which you probably aren't, to have seen the Aerosmith video, like, dude, it's a joke. Like, cut off shorts. Why don't you carry a hose or something? Anyway, look, what's your name? So it's like I'm just using teases to move myself in that right direction. Now, I'm improving all of these right now. But what you should do is if you go through the identity workbook and you pick 2 or 3 things that you discovered from that, I would seriously start workshopping some bait, some teases, some conversational threads, all about that. And we should actually be spending our Q&A portions of the calls on doing that and then trying to have them have conversations with them and use them in public for anybody. Again, not just women. Get functional with socializing. If you can get functional with socializing, then you can turn it into a social dynamic very easily that will work and be effective. If you want to talk to hot girls and have all these experiences and all this sort of stuff, man, the best thing that you can do is to get functional in a baseline area. And then you can start thinking about approaching in those crazy things, and you can go to Mecca on a Islamic journey and do your approaches there and then you'd be like a PUA badass motherfucker. But until then, until you get to the big time, like I would start to be social and use social dynamics that we learn here with people that you see and that you know. All right, I'm going to pause. Let's workshop these questions and see where we can go from there.